So I've got a bit of cold, as you may detect from my voice. And was just saying earlier that, there's some concern about maybe having picked up COVID in travels last week, but hopefully not. Hopefully it's not COVID, but it sort of speaks to this invisible world of germs, so to speak, that's around us all the time, and these invisible connections between people on a biological level, let alone a social level. And I was talking yesterday to a woman who's the head of IT for a medium-sized startup, and she was describing this challenging problem that she had been assigned to. She'd taken on a new responsibility with a 1-year timeline to bring this group of people together to integrate these systems. They'd acquired another company, and they had 2 of everything: 2 finance systems, 2 HR systems, 2 CRM systems, 2 marketing systems. And so they knew at some point they were going to need to consolidate the staff and the systems and the data. And they'd already done a part 1, a phase 1 of this project before she came on, and she was in charge of phase 2. And so they had project plans and so forth, and she was just supposed to execute. And she came on and started talking to people, and she realized that these people hated each other. Like the various people who were involved in this project couldn't stand each other. They'd had a terrible time in this phase 1 of this initiative. And so, yeah, they had project plans and so forth. And then on paper, everything was very respectful, and everything was very, polite and professional and so forth. And they had a clear plan of how to tackle the next 12 months. But everybody was blaming each other for things going wrong, and so she described very, very skillfully, in my view, navigating this challenge and gradually basically putting all of her energy over the last 3 months into just building some kind of a unity across that team, building communication, cooperation, honesty, so that people would actually say, one of the exercises she did is she asked everybody assembled there who was responsible for parts of the project to independently write out the percentage chances that the project had of success in their view. Like, without looking at anybody else, what do you think of the odds that this project will succeed? Wrote it all down, and then everybody showed their results simultaneously. There's a complete range. Some people saying 100% sure, some people saying 0% sure this project was going to 0% chance that project was going to succeed. And so she realized that people had a huge range of views, perceptions about whether it could work. And obviously the people who thought it was 0% likely to succeed, they saw obstacles that the people who thought it was 100% likely to succeed didn't see, right? And I was one observation that I made, which is, as with a lot of the observations that I find particularly significant, this observation is also blindingly obvious. But for what it's worth, I thought, what makes this particularly tricky is that it's all invisible. Those relationships between the people are invisible. Their views of each other are invisible. Software in general is invisible. You've got representations of it, but nobody can actually see. And so it's easy for people to put forward a view of things, a written description that seems like it makes sense, but there are all these invisible factors that are incredibly important. For example, does the group, respect each other and so forth? That if they remain unseen, and if they remain unspoken, and if they remain, in a sense, unconscious, like people people may not have even consciously recognized that they weren't on the same page, or that they saw obstacles that other people didn't. Um, but but what was significant is that clearly all of these people had the ability to verbalize and articulate the problems that they saw. For example, their spouses undoubtedly knew all about the problems at work. Right? The spouses always know about like who's not pulling their weight at work and who's ruining this project and how bad things are. Spouses certainly hear about that stuff, but they weren't being forthcoming with each other internally, seemingly, or if they were, it was just in the spirit of blame as opposed to trying to find a solution. So um, anyway, she navigated it very, very well. And so I asked her what were the skills that she developed over time that enabled her to succeed. Whereas she said 4 years ago, if she'd taken the project, she would have just powered through. She would have just said, all right, here we got to get to this, just forced her way through and powered through. And that's, I think, what a lot of people would have done or attempted to do. But and now bear in mind, in 3 months, the 3 months she's been on this project, they haven't gotten anything done. So from an outer point of view, they're no further along on the project than they were previously, because she's put all of her energy into just unifying the group and helping them to build comfort with each other and comfort with articulating the challenges and so forth. And so from an outer point of view, it looks, like they're behind schedule perhaps, and we don't know if they'll succeed or not. But people are happier now, because for the prior year, people were really quite unhappy with the work situation. It was taking a toll on everybody's mental health, and not just mental health in sort of an extreme way where people have to quit because it's too anxiety provoking, but mental health in the sense that if you were really mentally healthy, you would feel a sense of joy about your daily activities. You would feel a sense of connection with the people that you're with. You would like the people that you were around. Like a healthy plant, is thriving because it's in a good environment. It's got good sunlight and water, and so a healthy person is somebody who's experiencing a feeling of joy and connection. But they weren't experiencing any of that. They were experiencing the misery and the tedium and the grind of having to just push through this project. So I asked her what had really changed, and she thought about it and cited some writers and thinkers who were influential for her. But then one of the things that had really been influential for her was she had a few years ago suggested to their executive leadership that the company ought to have a diversity and inclusion program. And as is sometimes the case, the executive leader said, "Oh, excellent idea. You should do it." She's like, "Oh no." But she stepped up to it, and then she really poured a lot of energy into studying this topic of diversity and inclusion, the research and the literature. And she was emphasizing that it's a 50-year-old discipline, despite it only, becoming more widespread and common in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, perhaps. But one of the main conclusions that really made a deep impression on her were these two aspects. One was she was noticing that she wasn't bringing her full self to work, as often she was the only woman in the room in these very male-dominated IT spaces, and so she tended to be a bit quiet. Maybe always felt like she wasn't bringing her full self to work. But secondly, she really came to believe that every single person in that environment had a distinct, that one of the core messages with diversity is that the diversity of perspectives adds strength to the group and adds strength to the organization. And that one core message is that every individual participating in there has a unique point of view, unique background, unique interests and values and so forth. And that if those points of view are heard and values are brought in, and the group can find a cohesive course of action based on that, the group is stronger and wiser and more balanced and has more resilience and foresight than it would otherwise. And so when she came into this group, and I have no idea how, I have no idea what the demographics of her new team were. It may have all been, white males or whatever. But when she came into this group, she noticed that nobody was speaking up, right? Nobody was saying anything about these problems. There were all of these unspoken views and concerns and unspoken conflicts. And so that on some level, that diversity mindset that she developed kicked in, and she just set about just listening to people, just trying to draw them out, just trying to get the individual point of view of each of those participants. And if there were conflicts, like trying to understand, why were there conflicts, and she really gravitated towards the people that everybody said, just ignore this person, and oh, they're just difficult. And she wanted in particular to understand what was their view, what was their need, what was their pain that was maybe causing them to be so disagreeable with the others in the group. But so that's all a bit of a long segue into the topic that I wanted to touch on, which is developing profound respect. Developing a sense of profound respect. And there is a traditional, so you're familiar with, in Asian society, it's very common for people to bow, right? Indian society or Chinese society and so forth. They bow by putting their hands together, lowering their head, maybe bowing, different cultures, different customs. And we recognize that this is some sign of respect, showing respect, and even just naturally, like if you're engaging with a child and you want to really engage that child and draw them out, you might bend down and talk to them on their level, and it's sort of these height differentials actually play a part in how we perceive others. There's a funny effect you may have noticed with webcams. Like if people have their webcam like this all the time, you assume that they're very short. And if they have their webcam like this, you assume they're very tall, and you meet them in person and you're like, wow, I had no idea that you were so tall or short or whatever. But our minds, I think because of growing up in a world of grown-ups, big people, we have this association of height and power, height and respect. And no question that, anyway, so to bow even a little bit can be disarming to the other person, because it's showing that we're not trying to intimidate or be forceful. In fact, we're trying to show respect. But the traditional words that are used in the Sanskrit tradition, for example, the Buddhist tradition, for bowing or showing respect, namo, or same root as namaste or namaskar. Namo means to show respect, and it's actually a practice. It's a discipline that you can train in. It's like a muscle you can train in. And so one of the core practices that we trained in the Buddhist community that I studied with was prostration, and people would literally try to accumulate 100,000 prostrations or more. Now, the word prostration is not a very common word in our vernacular. Bowing is a much more common word. So I thought, well, why don't we just use the word bow instead of prostrate? But prostration, well, why don't we use the word bow? Because prostration means something even deeper, right? Prostration literally is like bowing incredibly deeply, where literally you're touching your head to the floor, your hands to the floor, maybe your full body prostration, you're touching your whole body to the floor. You may see people, obviously Muslims in prayer do this, Buddhists do this. I don't know, but I assume Hindus also have a practice of bowing where they're coming low to the ground, and it really is meant in the same spirit as just bowing a little bit, but it's meant to just indicate a profound respect, a deep, deep humility. And so, for example, well, one there is there's a verse that I like a lot, a traditional verse about the power of moral discipline and being a very, very ethical person, having a very ethically disciplined mind. And the verse says, resplendent like a great mountain amidst all beings bow down to it, bow down to the practice of moral discipline without any threat of force. This is an interesting verse, right? All beings bow down to this people who are practicing ethical conduct. Like if you know somebody like Gandhi, just a really good-hearted person, or at least the reputation that he has generally is a very good-hearted person, very ethical, very disciplined. And I'm sure you can have other people who come to mind, but we bow down to that behavior. But it's interesting, this term, without any threat of force, because sometimes bowing does have this connotation of like submission, dominance and submission, and the use of force. And that's what that, height differential with adults and children often had that same association of dominance and submission. And I'm trying to, I took responsibility for walking the dogs this morning. Normally Ashley does that. And I try to be very agreeable and gentle and so forth. But at some point, you just like with these dogs, you just have to like drag them along because these ones do not want to walk. And so I'm trying to become more comfortable with, the legitimate use of some force just to get a group, even a small group like a dog walking activity, just to get a group to move together in harmony requires some alignment. And that alignment requires a degree of humility. And we don't want to use force if there's no need to use force, certainly. And if we can possibly avoid using force. But this need for moving together as a group really does depend on some level of humility and respect for others, a kind of bowing. And at some point, at some level, there is a deep bowing or a deep prostration to whatever is the dominant force at that time. And traditionally, people might have bowed to kings and rulers and so forth. But increasingly, as businesses, you have to bow to the market and the needs of the time and the customers and the demands of what you're going through, and really humble yourself in the face of whatever difficulties, you could call it the universe, whatever. Humble yourself in the face of the universe. Humble yourself in the face of whatever difficulties you're facing, and have everybody else do that same activity, have that same level of respect, so that you can begin to work together, and you can begin to change. And I'm reminded of this this saying or this belief in the Alcoholics Anonymous or the 12-step community that you have to hit rock bottom before you're really willing to change in many cases. So hitting rock bottom really means that you've been utterly, utterly humbled, because there is this incredibly deep arrogance that we tend to hold in our mind on some level or another. There tends to be this deep arrogance. So if people really want to change something as deep as an addiction, you have to have hit rock bottom in the sense of being humbled, realizing that this internal demon of a habit or of an addiction is stronger than we are, or we really need help. And so prostration then, in a spiritual context, it has two, maybe three meanings. We can recognize it has these three meanings that I've kind of touched on. It means developing profound respect for our actual circumstances, right? Like humbling ourselves in the face of the difficulties that we're facing, and that takes the aspect of patience, just being patient and honestly and openly accepting whatever difficulties we're facing. And being patient is the opposite of denying or blaming or fighting against a situation. Being patient means totally accepting the reality of the situation, humbling ourselves in the face of the reality of our situation. The second meaning of prostration is prostrating to wisdom or good inner qualities like moral discipline, ethical conduct that I mentioned, or to individuals who show a good example of practicing this. And this is, in the Buddhist context, when you see people, for example, go to a temple and bow, they're bowing perhaps to a statue of Buddha representing that original teacher, or to a teacher who's giving teachings then, and they're showing respect for that person as a conduit for wisdom, which is a way of showing respect for wisdom. So showing respect for someone who's conveying wisdom or trying to help us to develop wisdom, possesses these good qualities, is a proxy for showing respect for wisdom. And you need to have that respect for wisdom if you're going to have any hope of developing it yourself. Right? You need to have respect for good qualities if you want to develop them yourself. And this third meaning of prostration, this third level of prostration, is prostrating to everyone that we come in contact with, and developing this a profound sense of respect on one level or another for every person that we come in contact with, whether they are a so-called wise person who has lived an ethical life and a good-hearted person who can, share wisdom. Of course, you should have respect in that case. But even if they're not, there is something that we can learn from everyone. For example, even if it's learning what not to do, right? Even if it's learning how impatient we are, right? Some people teach us how impatient we are. Have you ever met anyone like that who's taught you how impatient you are? Some people can teach us how self-centered we are, right? And if you don't realize how self-centered you are, well, you're never going to make effort to overcome that tendency. And so this practice of developing profound respect is far-reaching. We can call it, we can label it under this umbrella of prostration if we want, or bowing. And you'll see in religious literature, you'll see, I bow to this, I bow to that, but that's what it means really, is developing respect. So in the modern Western business context, we don't talk about bowing, right? But we do talk about respect. But probably not enough. And that probably is a sign that we're not necessarily training strongly enough in developing respect, because, as I said, it's a training. In the Tibetan community in particular is famous for prostration. People will literally prostrate on their bellies, crawling, moving like inchworms across hundreds or even thousands of miles of rocky terrain, going on pilgrimages. It is extraordinary, the depth of faith that some people in that community possess, and they they demonstrate it with these, these physical rituals that have become part of the culture and society. And even if that's not something that we aspire to replicate or emulate ourselves, or we don't understand or appreciate that mindset well enough, I think we hopefully can get some feeling for um, how much room there is for us to grow in terms of the level of respect that we have, even for ourselves, perhaps even for our own capacity and capabilities. So bowing even to the potential that we have inside ourselves, having respect for um, all of the work that others have put into helping to bring about the world that we're experiencing right now, the possessions that we have, each of which represent the hard work of many people and so forth. So that's a long prelude, but perhaps now what we can do is to take some time to meditate on this mindset of respect, developing profound respect, and we can think through these three aspects: respect for our circumstances, respect for wisdom, and respect for other people in our meditation. So as usual, to meditate, we can find a comfortable position. The most important aspect is our spine, our back being straight but relaxed. There is an extraordinary power in our posture, power to accomplish benefit for ourselves and others, a hidden power. Our spine is constantly supporting, 100 and X pounds of our body. Our spine has incredible strength, flexibility, carries our spinal cord, protects our nervous system, the basis for all of our understanding and activity. Our body is an incredible system. So we need a respect for our own body, balance of strength and relaxation. We close our eyes to reduce distraction. We take a deep breath in and out. And another breath, just inviting ourselves to relax more deeply. And then another breath, and just ask ourselves, what is important now? So imagine that we are in a beautiful, uplifting, inspiring environment. When you're in a beautiful place, we naturally develop respect. The place, the building itself can humble us, help us to develop a profound appreciation for the energy and the work that went into creating a sacred space. So we can enter such a space even in our imagination. We can know that the space that we are living in is really a mental space. We exist, we are living in the building, a building, so to speak, created by our own mind, environment created by our own mind. The world that we have created around us Is it a prison? Is it a dilapidated hovel building? Poor quality building? Is it a social gathering hall? Or is it in some sense a temple? And the difference all lies within our mind. So we bring to mind our world, so to speak, this universe that we abide in, which we imagine it like a building. But we develop the most profound respect for the circumstances that we have found ourselves in. We prostrate deeply to the world that we have found ourselves in with a mind of patience. My world may not be the world I would have picked. Circumstances may not seem perfect, but this is absolutely perfect situation now for me to learn. Yeah. So imagine bowing so deeply to our circumstances, our life, our environment. If your life humbles you by force, it may feel like you're hitting rock bottom. But if you intentionally develop humility, you feel that firm ground beneath you, imagining bowing deeply, touching your forehead, hands, chest to the ground. Feel this is the reality that I'm living in. This is what is supporting me. This is the foundation of my present experience. And I accept. And then we can bring to mind, and we can develop the second form of prostration, second form of profound respect for wisdom. We bring to mind the people writers, teachers, beliefs, and so forth that we feel to best represent wisdom, the greatest thinkers, insights, guidance for living our life. And we imagine that we are prostrating to these great wise thinkers, prostrating at the same time implicitly to whatever wisdom we have in our own heart. We can think of this Sanskrit word namo, namaste, namaskar. I prostrate, I bow to wisdom, peace, compassion, patience, humility, determination, whatever good qualities we want to develop. Then we can develop this third kind of prostration, profound respect for other people, the people who fill our world, the ones we spend time with. Imagine our parents beside us, our partners, and people who we work with, spend time with, children, friends, and so forth. The actual people in our community, our environment. We just think, I don't really know these people. I don't really know the depth of their experience. Don't really know why they see things the way they do, have the values they have, behave the way they behave. Having disrespect for others is just a feeble way to try to prop up our own fragile, vulnerable sense of self. But it is not a winning strategy. Our self will always be vulnerable until we develop a self that is profoundly respectful to others. Again, we imagine just bowing deeply, touching our forehead, hands, chest to the ground out of deep respect for all of the people who fill our life. Even the ones who harm us. They're helping us to develop the strength, resilience, patience, determination, and other good qualities we need. and develop a strong determination to carry this mindset of respect with us throughout our day, or week, or year. Holding deep patience for difficult situations, deep respect for wisdom wherever it may be found, and deep respect for all of the people that we interact with, however they may appear to us superficially. And then we can recognize that through this, even in this very brief time together, we have deepened and strengthened mental pathways that are paths that everyone can follow, pathways of respect. Through following these pathways in our mind, we can reach a world that is truly joy to behold and a joy to abide in. Can relax more concentration.